Lyndon Baines Johnson's actions of progressing civil rights in America opened up doors that could possibly never have been opened. Thanks to his renowned Johnson treatment, along with his unwillingness to give up for civil rights, LBJ pushed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 through Congress. Lyndon B. Johnson should forever be remembered for his actions in civil rights for America and its citizens. Lyndon B. Johnson, doing what's right for his nation.
Lyndon B. Johnson was born on August 27, 1908, near Stonewall, Texas, to parents Sam and Rebecca Johnson. Because he was born into a politically rich family, people made predictions right when he was born that he would grow up to be a great politician. Their predictions would prove to be right. At an early age, Lyndon took an interest in politics and wasn't afraid to share his opinions, even at the local barber shop with adults.
In school, people remarked on his natural ability to lead, but to also talk and boast, which sometimes came across as bossy. Throughout his schooling years, Johnson was very smart and especially excelled at debating.
Although very smart, LBJ was not intrigued by the idea of attending college. After going on the road to California for a year, Johnson returned to Texas, where he enrolled in Southwest Texas Teachers College.
Even in college, Johnson had an urge to express his opinions on politics. He started a campus political group, was the editor of the college newspaper, and excelled on the debate team. In 1930, he got a teaching job at Sam Houston High School in Houston, Texas, where he taught a public speaking class, as well as being the debate coach.
Finally, in the summer of 1931, he got the political opportunity that would spark his political career. LBJ was asked by Richard Kleberg to be his secretary if he was elected to Congress.
Fortunately for him, Kleberg got elected in November of 1931, so Johnson moved to Washington, D.C. Part of his new job involved traveling back and forth from D.C. to Texas. On one of his trips, he met Claudia Taylor, otherwise known as Lady Bird.
The two immediately fell in love, and they got married on November 17, 1934, only a few months after meeting. Then LBJ got his wish of a more active role in Washington. In 1935, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt appointed Johnson as the director of the National Youth Administration of Texas, where he helped young people get through the Depression.
Then, in 1937, LBJ was destined for bigger and better things. He quit his NYA position in 1937 and ran for Congress in a special election set up because James P. Buchanan had died.
He got elected at age 29, and in Congress he served the people of the Hill Country and eventually brought electricity to that area. After losing the Texas Senate race in 1941, he ran again in 1948, and this time won by a slim margin.
Once again, people remarked on his skill of bringing people together of different ideas. LBJ was elected once again in 1954, and this time was made the youngest Senate Majority Leader.
Johnson ran for president in 1960, but lost the Democratic bid to the man who would soon ask him to be his running mate, even though they were never close friends, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The two campaigned hard together, and they eventually won the 1960 election over Richard Nixon.
President Kennedy tried to keep Johnson busy by placing him in charge of the Space Committee and sending him on many trips to 33 countries. Kennedy also made him the head of the Presidential Committee on Equal Opportunity, which was set up to help the cause for civil rights. Many knew the vice president role wouldn't sit well with LBJ because of his thirst for power and desire to run the country his way, which he would be able to convince you was the optimal way.
Civil rights and segregation was becoming a heated issue in America, and it was reaching its peak with peaceful black marchers demanding respect and white people denying this. As John F. Kennedy's presidency started, many knew that he was for civil rights and was pushing for a major civil rights bill, which raised many questions on where the country was heading, such as should black people be just as equal as whites, but as soon as it came up, a turn of events happened for the worse.
While riding in a convertible limousine in Dallas, JFK was shot and killed on November 22, 1963. Although not hurt, Johnson was riding only a couple of cars behind him. Then, only a couple of hours after the shots were fired, LBJ was sworn in on Air Force One, then flown back to Washington, D.C. as the President of the United States of America.
In his speech addressed to the nation, LBJ said that he planned to carry on with many of Kennedy's plans, such as civil rights, but now he was in the position he wanted, but it wasn't achieved in the way he would have liked. President Johnson didn't waste any time in his new position to start changing America in the way he wanted it.
But many people, like George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, and Martin Luther King Jr., who was fighting for his rights and many other black people's rights, knew that one of the biggest controversies in America was civil rights. So sensing the African Americans' need for true freedom, he proposed a Civil Rights Act.
But the hardest part was still ahead. The bill went to the House, where the passing was stalled because of the chairman of the Rules Committee, Howard W. Smith.
After a long wait and still many signatures needed, a petition was set up, and to avoid public humiliation, Smith allowed the bill to pass through the Rules Committee. Naturally, LBJ got very frustrated and wanted the bill passed through the Senate as soon as possible, but this wouldn't come easy.
After a relatively smooth ride, the bill reached the full Senate to be debated on and voted.
Led by Richard Russell, a senator from Georgia, a filibuster was launched to prevent the passage of the bill. Johnson then said, "They can filibuster until hell freezes over." LBJ also didn't allow any other bills to be debated upon until the filibuster stopped and his civil rights bill was passed. When confronted with Richard Russell, he told him that neither him nor anyone else was going to stand in his way. Russell responded by saying, "It's going to cost you the South and an election."
Finally, after 54 days, a compromise bill was presented and the filibuster stopped. LBJ then spent countless hours on the phone, persuading and negotiating with many senators to vote in favor of the bill.
After the bill was passed by the Senate, it was sent to President Johnson and signed into law as one of the most controversial bills of that time. When all was said and done, the bill banned the discrimination of any person in public places, the workplace, and in schools.
He was a politician in the sense of wanted to bring about change. He liked power. He knew how to use power. And so there was almost the adrenaline flow of, this has got to be done, and I'm going to do it.
My fellow Americans, I am about to sign into law the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
After he signed this major bill into law, there were many new views on LBJ, including traitor from the South to many whites and savior to many blacks. And although the bill was designed to help blacks, unfortunately they were targeted even more now with disgraceful violence. Although the Civil Rights Act did give blacks more equality, it did have one major loophole: voting rights.
This need was expressed through many peace marches led by civil rights activists. But on March 7, 1965, the peaceful marchers were attacked by many policemen with fire hoses and tear gas, which then put 50 of the 600 marchers in the hospital. This day would go down in history as Bloody Sunday.
Many people were hoping that Johnson would pass an act letting blacks vote, but LBJ didn't think that he should pass 2 civil rights acts in 2 years. But a week after the violence on the marchers in Selma, Alabama, President Johnson made a historic speech using the phrase, "We shall overcome." In his speech, President Johnson asked every American to join him in the cause of guaranteeing blacks the right to vote.
It's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice. And we shall overcome.
The gratification didn't last long, though. Only 5 days after LBJ signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a major riot was sparked in Watts, a black neighborhood in Los Angeles, leaving many dead and others injured.
6 days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities.
People soon started doubting Johnson when his first reaction to this riot was doing nothing.
After choosing not to run for a second term, he moved back to Texas, where he died of a heart attack on January 22, 1973. Lyndon B. Johnson, who grew up as a white Southerner, overcame his own biases towards blacks and then led the nation over their own biases as well.
It wasn't just raw politics. It wasn't just raw legacy. He knew that this was the right thing to do, the good thing to do, and knew he could make it happen. And I think all that comes together probably to help explain what drove him and caused him to do this.
Lyndon B. Johnson should forever be remembered for his actions for civil rights and doing what's right for America at that time. LBJ's legacy should be one that is remembered for his advancements for civil rights at a critical point in America's history. Lyndon B. Johnson, doing what's right for his nation.